Hi, and welcome to the Caterpillar Cross Stitch YouTube channel. My name is Ford from Son of a Stitch, and this week I'm going to teach you how to do the loop start, even if you're not using 2 strands of floss. Now before I go too much further, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment down below. If you've learned something from me on this channel, best way to pay me back is to do those 3 things. It only takes a second, costs you nothing, and it really helps me out, so I'd appreciate it if you did. Now, loop start is a thing that most people had never heard of before a few years ago, but has been a total game changer for the cross-stitching community. It makes it a lot easier to keep the back of your project tidy, and it makes it easier to move quickly. But the drawback to the method is that it really only works if you're using an even number of strands. The reason is that to do a typical loop start, instead of taking 2 pieces of floss and feeding them through your needle, you take 1 piece of floss, you fold it in half, and you stick both ends through the needle. That gets you your 2 strands for stitching, even though it's really only 1 length of floss. And so to start your thread using that technique, what you do is you leave a little bit, and I'm going to show you with the method that leaves it on the surface of the fabric. I'm going to show you what we call the loop start from the front method. You leave a little bit of that loop on the front. You do your first half of a stitch, feed your needle through that loop, tighten it down to 1 corner, and then just kind of pop that little loop around to the back side. And then you are done. You are ready to start stitching. Obviously that's very fast and very easy, very desirable way to start cross-stitching. Especially with the loop start from the front method, that means you don't have to turn your project over. Now I'm going to take just a second here to remind you to join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch VIP Stitch Club. When you join, you'll get an ebook with 9 free PDF cross-stitch patterns in it, including a year-long temperature tracker pattern. You'll get an instant download of our top 10 cross-stitching tips, and you'll get advance notice of any upcoming projects, products, socials, or retreats that Caterpillar might be coming out with. So make sure you hit the link down there in the description so that you can be the first to know about new things coming out. So that's all well and good, but what if you're stitching on a larger count of fabric, for instance, and you need the better coverage that's afforded by 3 strands of floss? How do you do that? So let me show you. You can either, instead of folding your floss in half, you can fold it in thirds, like this, or you can use 1 piece of floss and then another piece that's half as long, and use 1 folded and 1 not folded to get your 3 strands. I'm going to fold my piece in thirds. So since I've folded in thirds, each end of my piece of floss has 1 loop and 1 end. Now you'll notice that on the end opposite my needle, I've left a little bit more floss than the length of the loop. I need to have that to secure it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my thread in exactly the same way that I did with 2 strands. Just pull it down through the fabric most of the way. Bring my needle up. Feed my needle through that loop. And pull it down close to the surface of the fabric. And that's going to leave the little semi-loop and the little piece of tail in the corner. I will just feed my needle back down through to the back side, making sure that it pulls that little tail with it. And then when my loop gets to the surface of the fabric, just a little bit of a tug will tighten that down, and then I can just begin stitching. That little tail will give enough friction that that extra strand of floss will not come undone. And then I can just commence stitching, just like with the regular loop start. Now, one word of caution is that one of the reasons we use cotton for so many textile applications is because it has a real tendency to grab on and hang on to itself. If you are using some of those cheap flosses that you can buy online that are a blend of synthetic and natural fibers, I can't guarantee that they're going to have sufficient friction to hang on to themselves to use this method. So be aware of that if you're using those flosses. I'll just go ahead and complete all of those stitches. And then you can see that once I'm done with all of those stitches, that little tail is still right there. And you can use your finishing thread to tuck it up under the stitches that are there. Now, if you do have questions and things that are not answered in my videos, or if you just want to be around a supportive community, I strongly recommend that you go and join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Facebook group and follow the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Instagram. There's a tremendous supportive community of stitchers that have grown up around the Caterpillar brand, and those are the best two places to find them. But what if you're only using one strand? Say you're doing black work, or you're doing some backstitch lines that are off by themselves and you don't have a stitch that you can secure them against. Well, there is a technique for that, but it does have one minor drawback, so let me show you that. So the way that's done is we start by threading our needle and pulling most of our length of floss down through the fabric from the front. But we're going to leave a little bit of a tail there, and we're going to do that a little away from where we want to start, but in the direction that we're going to be moving, so that our first few stitches will move towards that tail. And then we'll bring our needle up to the surface of the fabric at the place of the first stitch that we want to make. And then we will pass the needle actually back in through the same hole. So remember when I showed you the 2-strand loop start, we had a little loop on the front? This little loop that I've just created by doing that is now the loop that we're going to use in that way. So I will bring my needle up through the surface of the fabric, feed it through the little loop that I've created, and cinch that down to a corner. Then I'll just feed my needle down through the corner that I cinched that loop to, and just as before, I'll pop it down to the back side. So the one drawback of using this method with one strand of floss stitching is that that first stitch is double thick. So it is going to be 2 strands, while the rest of it is only going to be 1. So then I can do the rest of my 1-strand stitches there, and once I get over close to that tail I left on the surface, I'll just pull it up a little bit and trim it. And the friction of those stitches will hold that in place. So this is especially handy if you're stitching on a high count fabric, for instance like 28 or 25, and you're only using 1 strand to make your cross stitches. So that loop start method with 1 strand does have that minor disadvantage that I mentioned of your very first stitch being a little bit thicker than the rest of the stitches that you do. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not really very noticeable. If that bothers you, however, I would suggest that you check out this video of 6 different ways to start that I did, and take a look at the section about the waist knot method. I think you'll probably enjoy that one. So that 1-strand method and 3-strand method of loop start answers probably the most commonly asked question in the comments of this channel. If you have a different technique, share that in the comments down below with the other viewers. I do want to thank you so much for watching. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next time.